Rebecca Gill, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me on.
So one of the things we have in common, Rebecca, is we've both been working with larger enterprise and larger companies for, the last 15 to 20 years. What kind of changes and trends have you seen, and how has your experience in working so long in this space directly helped your clients?
The one thing I will tell you as a takeaway that is the most valuable that I've experienced that I've had, and the most valuable takeaway is in a lot of cases, the enterprise is fragmented. There's a lot of people moving and changing and planning and updating and executing, and there isn't a cohesiveness to that SEO strategy and plan. And when that's in place, there's holes, there's gaps, and your SEO starts to fall apart. When I first started doing SEO 15 years ago, I was a small business and I was competing against enterprise level websites. And the way I could beat them was they lacked strategy and they lacked execution tied to that strategy because there were multiple departments and multiple people. And when you looked at their SEO from the outside, you could see that there wasn't that cohesive plan that was needed. And that's definitely both, it's a challenge for the enterprise, but then it's also an opportunity for anyone who competes against enterprise level websites, because you can be much more structured, much more cohesive, again, making SEO an enterprise level effort and making sure that everybody is working together in harmony towards a single point of focus and a single pursuit.
Yes, we do see in enterprise clients how sometimes if business units or different departments don't plan well together, you end up with a fragmented SEO strategy. Do you have any advice for our clients on what they can do to prepare in working with an SEO consultant?
Without question, I would tell you to have an SEO champion, and that's not somebody who's at a lower level within the organization. It's somebody higher up in the organization who truly understands the value of SEO and the importance it has in the enterprise as a whole, and making sure that that message is communicated to everybody that's involved. And it's just like any project in the enterprise. If you have a champion who's really believes in what is being done and understands the ramifications it has in the enterprise and the long-term viability of the organization, that speaks volumes. That sets the direction for both internal and external resources, and it really helps make the entire process a success.
Sometimes we have clients who are willing to really be on the cutting edge of technologies, and sometimes they have to be bomb-proof and they have to make sure that they're doing things that have only been proven out there. In how you're seeing the SEO market change and how quickly it changes, can the enterprise afford to wait and see, or do they have to stay right on top of all these changes that happen to actually have effective SEO?
Great question. I think with SEO, you really have to always be aware of what's changing and the trends and the shifts that are occurring. You don't necessarily have to jump on them immediately, but you need to be well aware, be cognizant of the activity around you, and then make a calculated decision on how fast you have to adopt it. You can't sit back and wait. You can't wait for an SEO book to come out to give you that roadmap, because by the time that book goes to publish and you actually can get a physical copy of it, the information's changed with SEO. SEO is constantly moving, and the enterprise has to keep that in mind because they have to be moving along with it. And again, take calculated risks, but make sure that those risks are mitigated and they're within a parameter that's acceptable, because you can't wait for everything to be safe to be able to move forward. You'll be left behind and you'll be on page 10 of Google if that happens.
What are the things that are unique when we talk about finding the right strategy for SEO in the enterprise?
I think when we used to look at SEO in the past, there were bits and pieces that people would focus on. And, we've grown up with SEO thinking it's primarily about content and links, and that's the core of the internet, which it still is. But modern SEO has become a building block approach of technology and really some advanced topics. that go into making SEO successful, whether it be small business or the enterprise. And as we move forward in 2008, some of these are becoming even more and more prevalent and very necessary for the enterprise groups and organizations to really understand what they are and how they apply to their marketing strategy. And these include things like semantic search and the knowledge graph and schema and structured data. Mobile first indexing is coming in just a few weeks. You've got AMP adoption. Then technical SEO has become super important, and you can't get away with it, especially when you are looking at those large websites that have age and multiple people interacting within the content and the code.
Right. That's a lot. When we break that down, I mean, I could imagine one of the advantages that enterprise clients have in SEO is they have a lot of resources to throw at this.
Yes.
I mean, how would you break down that strategy? What's the first thing to focus on?
I think the first thing is understanding the components that go into modern SEO, and then having a good understanding of who they apply to. So for example, if you just look at semantic search would directly impact the content marketers within the organization. It's going to, affect the SEO people who might be doing the actual optimization, the strategy, and the planning, but the content writers and those marketers that are responsible for that actual content, they need to be aware of what it is, because traditionally they've been taught to look at things like keyword density, which no longer really applies in SEO. Now Google's a lot more smarter, and it's looking for things in regards to the relationship and user intent, and how a human's user intent actually relates to the contents that's being written. It no longer cares about keyword density. I mean, it needs keywords to have a good understanding of where things are and have a strong idea of the topic involved. But there's a lot more elements that go into that content and the optimization that replace that density. It's things like the synonyms and the words that you use around the content. It's what's happening in the current day trends. And just for an example, if there was a movie that was coming out that was called Grounded, if you did a search for the phrase or the term grounded, 3 months before that movie arrived, Google would give you results about being grounded, like to the dirt, to the ground. If the movie just arrived out and it's being talked about on the internet and social media and people are searching for it, Google's going to immediately think, when a search is done for that the user and the intent is based on the movie. So it uses current trends. It also looks at the search you did just before the current search. And if it's confused, it's going to look at the content within that article itself or that URL to try to help better figure out what the nature of that content is and apply it to search. And it's just a different way of thinking about keyword strategy and about how that content is actually written, the depth of that content, and how you really want to present it.
What's the difference between the old keyword strategy of really focusing on keyword and what's becoming semantic search?
Yeah, so in 10 years ago, we would look for one word or maybe 2-word phrases to target for keywords, right? And target for our content. We would map that to specific pieces of information on our website. We still do that today, but we need to look at that at a more expanded level. Longer tail keyword phrases are much more important because of voice search. People are using it, they're searching with the voice as opposed to typing. So by the nature of that process, the phrases are getting longer. Google's much more intelligent, and it can give much better results for longer phrases. So people are using them more and more. And so that just changes right there the type of keywords that you may select and that you might want to put as a focus within your planning and strategy. And then when you're going to write that content, Google's smart enough now to know that things like small, tiny, miniature, and minor are all really the same thing. And so you wouldn't create a individual piece of content for tiny house and then a different one for small house, because to Google in today's environment, they're the same thing, and it's going to interchange, those search inquiries and produce the same piece of content. It's just much smarter and how it handles that information. And it's relying on the writer to truly do a good job and cover an entire topic. and make sure that there's enough information in there so it can utilize it properly in search. And it's just very different than what we would have done 5 years ago or 10 years ago or even 2 years ago.
So you mentioned knowledge graph. Can you tell us how that affects us?
Certainly. So the knowledge graph was first introduced in 2012. And while it has been getting used since then, it hasn't really become mainstream until recently. So now every time you do a search in Google, the chances of having some piece of that knowledge graph appear on the search engine results page is much greater. It's very prevalent. And by that I mean you don't just receive pay-per-click ads and then traditional organic search results. You have things appearing above or on the side that are giving you a really rich display of information. And some of that information may never even actually take you to a website. It could just be Google getting information and presenting that into the search engine results page to keep the user right there. And that itself has definitely shifted. It's given marketers opportunities to be in it's given marketers an opportunity to be in like featured snippets, which is that position 0 at the top. Before any results at all, you can be position 0. But then you could also have the case where they're going to pull information out and present the answer, and you're not going to have a really good opportunity to get anyone to click through to your site. And so we have to approach that in two different ways. We need to plan differently. We need to look at keyword focus and keyword strategy very carefully to make sure that we are targeting the right phrases so that we could potentially get in that position 0 as opposed to getting lost at the bottom of the search engine results page. And then we have to craft content to be able to actually optimize it and land in those spots that we want. And it's definitely a shift in today's environment. And again, it comes back to both the folks that are creating that SEO strategy, being in tune with the people that are creating the content to make sure that they are working together to meet these new trends and staying on top of those changes.
So Rebecca, how does Google index the information for the knowledge graph?
So the knowledge graph is really taking bits and pieces of information from all over the internet. It's Google collecting things about people, places, and things and bringing them together. And it's not just bringing them together, it's Google understanding how they connect and how a user in the search engine results page might want to see this data presented. And it does produce a shift in the way things operate within enterprise SEO, because you have to keep that idea always present in your mind and know that Google's using that knowledge graph to produce results and to drive visitors to your website. And that is much different today than it was years ago.
Rebecca, we're hearing a lot about voice search. How is that going to affect enterprise clients?
Voice search is growing significantly. The last official report that Google gave is I believe it was 20% of all searches are done by voice, and it's continuing to rise. And there's lots of crazy projections on how much that is really going to be shifting. How does that change for the enterprise? Well, if you look at Google with the current movement towards mobile first indexing, right? Right now for enterprise organizations, a lot of them have two different websites. They've got a desktop website and a mobile website, right? And so those are two different entities. And a lot of times that mobile website has much less information than the desktop. And as Google goes to mobile first indexing, it's going to first look at that mobile site and decide based on that information what it should be put into the index and how it should rank that content. Now bring in voice search, where people are searching for longer, more complex phrases that are specific to a problem or a visit they want to do to brick and mortar stores and things like that. They need a really good answer. And if you have Google going to these stripped down mobile sites, it is going to hurt the enterprise because they're not going to have enough information there to be able to provide the answer to that in-depth question that's just natural in the voice search and kind of inquiry. And so the enterprise definitely needs to be aware of that. And if they do have those two different website scenarios, they need to make sure that they're really in sync, both with the level of content that they have, the URLs, and how those are handled, schema and structured data, meta titles and descriptions. All of that really needs to be very well architected and executed on both websites. And that's definitely a change than what we've had in the past.
We've talked about the semantic search, the knowledge graph, schema and structured data, as well as voice search. Keeping in mind that larger companies have a lot more resources, what kind of advantages do they have in staying on the cutting edge of keeping up with how Google is indexing and pulling these things together?
Well, hopefully their resources are staying on top of continuing education opportunities, which is really critical because things change so quickly with SEO, and you have in an enterprise lots of different people doing lots of different roles. And SEO is really an organizational issue and problem and challenge. It's not just departmental or even individual. The enterprise as a whole needs to back the SEO process, the strategy, the planning, and needs to understand what's happening in the world around you today and not be based on education from 5 years ago, because you'll quickly get outdated. And the challenge for the enterprise is to make sure that all of those people are educated. But then it's also an opportunity because you have these resources, because you're a larger organization, you do have the funds, the time, the people to get them to the right conferences, the right courses, the right information to stay on top of it and to really, put your best foot forward with SEO.
So for years, we've been hearing about how important mobile is in search engine optimization. What's going on lately with that?
The big push is that mobile first indexing and the fact that Google is moving towards that. And Google's been leading up to it with the focus on performance and speed and making sure that your websites render well on mobile. It has shifted recently with that mobile first indexing because, again, if we have two different websites, one for mobile, one for desktop, we have to make sure that both of them are stellar. And we have to give a lot more love to that mobile website than we did in the past. It can't just be a stripped down version. If there is only one website and it's mobile responsive, we need to make sure that mobile isn't an afterthought, that is really at the, it's throughout the whole process from design and development through launch testing and then ongoing audits and health checks. You have to have a strong focus on mobile and not just the content and the technical. It also has to be on the user experience to make sure that the actual human that's coming really does get the data that they need. It's easy to use, it's easy to access, it loads fast, and they have a positive user experience and stay on that site to continue to explore and move around.
And how does that play into AMP adoption, AMP adoption?
So AMP is Google technology that is designed to speed up websites. Not everybody's jumped on it because it is Google technology and it's not like an open source software package like WordPress. You are putting yourself in Google's hands. And there is a process to going through AMP. It's not just flip a switch and it's ready and available for you. So it's really for the enterprise, it's a decision on, is AMP the right solution, for you and for your websites? And in a lot of cases, enterprise organizations have lots of websites. And so the next question is, does AMP need to be rolled out across all of those websites? And the answer to that is probably no. I definitely caution people to not always just jump on the phrases that you hear come out or the instructions from Google and things you need to do next. Sometimes you got to sit back and wait and see how things go to really decide whether that change or that movement and that trend is right for you and it's right for a particular website. Because in the case of AMP, it's not going to be. And I think that organizations, at the enterprise level need to understand what AMP is, understand the efforts involved into rolling out AMP, and that you just can't take it back away real quick if it doesn't work out and it doesn't do what you want. And then really truly see how it's going to impact that mobile experience, because AMP removes what is considered to be unnecessary elements And that's a relative term, right? An unnecessary element may be really important to you on one website, but not on another. So, you have to try it out in a safe testing environment to decide whether it is producing a positive user experience for the human, or if it's going to degrade down that experience and maybe jeopardize some of that revenue stream that you're relying on.
So, Rebecca, in a lot of the events that you're doing, I'm hearing you speak more and more about technical SEO. Tell us about its importance.
Technical SEO is growing and growing and growing in importance. And it's funny because, years ago, I don't think many people, whether they're small business or enterprise, really thought about it. But today, you can't get away from it. It has to be front and center. And technical SEO and SEO as a whole spans the entire life cycle of a website. It's not just the code. The code is super important. At an enterprise level, you need to make sure that you have really high quality code and that your resources understand that they have to build out that code, in a very concise, best practice manner so it can scale and it can be robust over time. But it's also down to starting at the design level to make sure that what the graphic designer is presenting and the storyboards that they're wanting to execute can be in line with SEO, the SEO strategy, and can support long-term technical growth long-term technical SEO. You have to have technical SEO in mind, both at graphic design during the build-out process of the code base, during the build-out process of that content, and then with audits pre-launch, post-launch, and then health checkups, months later or a year later. It's super important, and it has to be viewed that way because technical SEO is growing in requirements, and it is continuing to become more important to everybody.
So it seems like there's a lot of things to keep in mind for technical SEO. Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of page speed and writing code in a way that scales well so that there's page speed, how that affects Google and its indexing?
It's really critical in today's SEO, and that's because Google's put such an emphasis on performance and speed. And the reason Google's doing it is because they came out and said very openly that they have yet to reach their true target audience, that all of these third world countries that are coming online are this whole new customer base they've not had, and they are going to do everything they can to serve this audience. And that audience has no broadband. They have mobile devices with limited speeds, very expensive plans, and for Google to be able to really service that market and bring in their own revenue from that target demographic, they have to have websites that are very robust, with strong performance, strong speed, that have solid code, and that can really produce a positive user experience. And at an enterprise level, that means the code bloat has to go away. Right? It means your code has to be ready to both be in compliance with things like the structured data and accessibility and the things that we're traditionally expecting, but it also has to really be robust from a performance standpoint. And as you grow your audience and your activity on the website needs to be able to adapt to that and really continue to perform at that same level. And that starts at the very beginning with the agency that you utilize or your in-house team that builds out the code, the way that design has been crafted, all the way to the actual person entering in that content to make sure that that is also in support of performance and speed.
I know at Web Savvy Marketing these days, you're doing a lot of audits. What are you finding?
It really ranges based on the client and the type of website, but without question, I find just broken code. Code that can't validate, code that doesn't have accessibility built in, code that's really bloated so that when you look at an individual page, you see more code than you do actual content. And that's definitely an issue. And then there's the user side of things where the users have created really large, long content silos that don't produce a good user experience and make it very difficult for the search engines to crawl and index And those are just a couple of, the things that I typically run into, but those are definitely the most prominent ones.
So when you're doing a audit for a website and it's a larger company or an enterprise class company, is there any preparation that you do that's different from medium-sized companies or smaller SEO projects?
When you're looking at an enterprise level website, you definitely have to take into account the size of the content and the search engine's ability to crawl through that content, really get a sense of that content, the updates that have been made to it, and then position that in the index. And that's very different than what you would have for a small business that might be 100 URLs or even 1,000 URLs. The search engines don't have trouble getting through that and digesting that information. But when you get into a large website, it definitely does. And looking at those log records for the website and really making sure that the top content that you need reviewed is being reviewed and being crawled and being, refreshed for indexing, that becomes critical for the enterprise. And it's definitely something that differentiates enterprise level audit with an actual audit for a small business.
So one thing we run into a lot is clients who have a problem with the data ownership policies that Google has with Google Analytics. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a valid fear and a valid concern. I'm always a proponent of people owning their digital destiny, and data is part of that. You have to have solid, consistent data to be able to have a strategy and a plan to be able to execute. And if you are putting your data in the hands of a third party, it could be available today, it could be gone tomorrow, or they could change the way they're reporting that data, which could definitely skew the efforts that you have. So regardless of what it is, whether it's data or it's even, marketing on Facebook, you need to be aware of those third parties and that software and know there's only so much within your control, and keep control of everything that you can, because you do want to control your digital destiny.